Ukraine can be stopped when the president of the United States says publicly, NATO will not enlarge. He could add parentheses, it was a bad idea. If he wants, he could say, it wasn't my idea, it was their terrible ideas. He could say Obama did the coup.
So recently, Jeffrey Sachs revealed the true and only way that Trump can end the war in Ukraine, at least from the United States perspective, and why he's been unwilling to do so. Why a peace agreement isn't the product of this summit that recently happened between Trump and Putin in Alaska. Sachs is one of the best and most accomplished foreign policy analysts in the world, so let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Stay out of our lane, we'll stay out of your lane. This is really smart advice, even smarter in a nuclear-armed world. Don't go to provoke. Don't think you run the world. Don't expand NATO eastward to Russia's border, for God's sake, after you have said repeatedly, explicitly, not ambiguously, to President Gorbachev and to other Soviet and Russian leaders that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. And if you think it's a myth, go to the National Security Archive of George Washington University and pull out the dozens of documents or the clips of Hans Dietrich Genscher saying explicitly, this doesn't refer to a promise within Germany, this is in general, we're not going to move eastward. That's what the Monroe Doctrine really says. What are we doing trying to push NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia? Well, I'll tell you what we're doing. We're doing what Lord Palmerston tried to do in 1853 in the Crimean War, which was to surround Russia and banish Russia from the Black Sea. That's the idea. And immediately after the Maidan coup, which my colleague Victoria Nuland was a very competent sponsor of, she now teaches diplomacy at Columbia University.
Isn't that the kicker? Diplomacy. Victoria Nuland, the engineer, the architect of the Maidan coup, who, had that leaked audio tape with the ambassador to Ukraine at the time, Jeffrey Piot, talking about who had to be in Ukraine's provisional government. But no, Sachs is exactly right here. And the point that really stuck with me about what he said here is the fact that this was stupid to expand NATO and get into these empire building schemes in Europe, even during the unipolar moment when the US was essentially the sole superpower of the world. But it's even stupider now to continue on this road, this path to destruction in a multipolar world when China and Russia are considerable forces, have considerable armaments of nuclear weapons on hand. It's even stupider to treat them the way we have, and he's exactly right. The Monroe Doctrine and that type of policy, which was bilateral, by the way, would be a much better policy for the U.S. to embrace. It's what the founders prescribed, and I think that was the right idea.
You cannot make this up. Even George Orwell did not imagine such a thing. Anyway, she teaches diplomacy together with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, clown world, when Clinton and Nuland are the ones teaching diplomacy, right? Just rename those courses War 101, please.
It's so weird. Anyway, the coup came, and immediately the post-coup government said, we don't think the Russians should be in Crimea. That is their naval base for the last 100, from 1783. I won't calculate the number of years. That was the idea. It was Palmerston's idea. It was Brzezinski's idea. That's not the Monroe Doctrine. That is, we will be in your face, right up to your face. We will annoy you. We will, as the Rand Corporation wrote in 2019 in one of the most absurd, dangerous, ridiculous exemplars of American foreign policy, we will extend you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The US and NATO has used Ukraine as a pawn in a proverbial chessboard, as an empire building game to try to expand US influence and domination and hegemony throughout the world. That is what John Mearsheimer talks about when he says that the US led Ukraine down the primrose path. So the real victims outside of the US taxpayers that had to bankroll this thing, endure inflation to finance it from the central bank, are the innocents in Ukraine that aren't complicit in what this government is doing. Because after all, they elected a government that was the Yanukovych government prior to the Maidan coup in 2014 that the US helped overthrow, that inserted a new regime that was more bellicose toward Russia. So it's lots of innocents in Ukraine that are enduring these harsh measures, the martial law, the crackdown on political dissent against Zelensky, the banning of oppositional political parties, the expansion of conscription, that's slavery to the state. They are being used in this grand scheme of empire building, and that's why Ukrainians don't even want this thing anymore.
Extending Russia, a document of a think tank, how to annoy Russia in 27 different ways. Is this really what we pay them for? How to provoke the other nuclear superpower with 6,000 nuclear weapons, and then wonder why the hand of the doomsday clock is 89 seconds to midnight? These people are crazy. Honestly, it's very, very dangerous.
It is, and then we're the crazies for wanting actual non-intervention and not wanting to be the policemen of the world. Remember, we're the conspiracy theorists. We just want to give everything to Putin as if the default is we have to defend, by way of the US Treasury, every inch of foothold against anyone on Earth that wants to attack a different country. That's absurd. That's empire building. That's neocon mentality.
So I know nobody told me how long to speak, and I tend to speak about 6 hours. So I'm going to stop very shortly. Let me just say that all the major conflicts can be ended straightforwardly. The Ukraine war, the casus belli of the Ukraine war is NATO enlargement, US coup, CIA operations all over Ukraine. Even the New York Times reported that one a couple of months ago. We've got to stop being in Russia's face. They know it. They know all of it. They were so kind as to post Victoria Nuland's call with Jeffrey Piat, choosing the next government. Thank you. They know all of it.
Yeah, and just imagine what conversations about that and other coups the US has participated in that don't reach the light of day because there is no whistleblowers, there are no groups like WikiLeaks, and the government cracks down on any kind of transparency regarding that. It would compromise national security if you knew about our foreign coups, right?
They know who paid for the Maidan demonstrators. They've got everything.
US aid to the tune of $5 billion. It's unclear how much actually got into supporting the coup itself, but US aid provided $5 billion worth of funding to Ukraine. You know, some people say that, it's about $100 million that was pumped in there to support the rock concerts in the winter of 2014 when they were trying to rile the people up. It's hard to know exactly, but certainly the US helped fund that.
We've got to stop the provocations. And yes, by the way, there was no Russian demand for territory of any kind. Crimea, they wanted a 25-year lease, which they negotiated, President Putin and President Yanukovych. Not territory, not a claim. Even after the coup, Russia took back Crimea. No, NATO, you're not getting that base. But even when it came to the Donbass, they just said autonomy in this post-coup anti-Russia regime. The United States said no to that one too. And incidentally, I'll share with you just one moment. In 2021, the war could have been avoided easily by President Biden saying to President Putin, NATO will not expand to Ukraine and I will say so. And I called Jake Sullivan. He teaches at Harvard. It's all consistent. after you fail in Washington. And I said, Jake, avoid a war. Stop NATO enlargement. It's ridiculous. It's useless. Would you like it on the Rio Grande in Mexico, a Russian military base? Said, Jeff, we have an open door policy for NATO. Said, Jake, give me a break. Open door policy. I repeated the Monroe Doctrine to no effect. And I said, Jake, stop the NATO enlargement. He said to me, Jeff, NATO's not going to enlarge to Ukraine. I said, Jake, we're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you say so? He said to me, don't worry, there's not going to be a war.
Yeah, it's so absurd. You can see how the ruling class operates, that there's an open door policy for NATO, but imagine if that was BRICS' mentality toward Canada and Mexico, not only flirting with including both of those countries in their military alliance, but pumping arms into Canada and Mexico. Maybe, I don't know, overthrowing the government in Mexico City and replacing it with one that was adversarial toward the United States, talked about attacking the United States, talked about not having good relationship with the United States. That's what this would be like. So he's exactly right here. There were so many off-ramps to this thing, and Biden didn't take them, and Trump hasn't taken them yet. And guess who else didn't? Obama and Bush. Those two administrations fanned the flames too. Bush had the Bucharest summit that said Ukraine and Georgia will be part of NATO. Obama said continuously that NATO would be enlarged by including Ukraine. They've all flirted with this idea, and there were so many ways to avert this war, and none of them held.
Honestly, these people are not clever. They're not clever. What they're doing makes no sense. They don't know what they're doing. We don't know when Biden checked out, maybe already then. But in any event, they're not smart. They're getting us into trouble. So we could make peace in Ukraine. Yesterday was a hint of it, but you could see the president is so, everything about our media, about the Congress, about the military industrial complex, whether he has the skill or not, I don't know. But if he were a communicator and had the guts, and what he should stand up and explain to the American people, this was about NATO enlargement, we're not going to do it. That would be the end. But he can't quite, he says it privately, I'm sure, but not publicly. Why? Because we're still trapped. We're trapped as Eisenhower told us we're trapped.
Yeah, we're trapped in a military-industrial complex that in some ways maintains more power than our elected officials and our president over our foreign policy. It's like my good friend Tom Woods says, no matter who you elect, you always get John McCain. And that's the truth. I hate to say that that's the truth, but that's what we've seen during my lifetime anyway, in terms of foreign policy. And Sachs is right. If Trump really wanted to end this thing, he could disengage tomorrow. Or if he wanted to drum up a peace agreement with Putin, he could do that and say, Zelensky, here's your peace agreement. You can agree or not. If you disagree, I'm going to stop bankrolling your country in this war. That's all Trump would have to do if he seriously wants to end this. But he's not willing to end this. What he said is, well, we've had, a basic framework for peace on the table, and I'm going to run it by NATO and Zelensky. Well, that's just a way of saying that, he's making it look like he tries, and he's not trying. He holds all the cards. He holds all the leverage when it comes to disengagement. He doesn't have all the cards when it comes to a peace because Putin's in the driver's seat. He's the one that occupies the Donbass, but that's the truth. If he wants to end it, that's the way he'd end it.
And all these think tanks up and down the East Coast are bought the same way. It's all phony. Everything you hear about, the data, there was a report recently about Russia's casualties being X times that of Ukraine by one of the Washington think tanks. So I looked at it was absurd. So I looked at the footnote. Where'd that come from? The footnote came from the Ministry of Defense of Britain. I was already suspicious. So
Yeah, and they only will report on data that comes from, the Five Eyes intelligence agencies and the Ukrainian government. That's all they report on. When really, if you look at this thing, it looks like Ukraine may have lost over 1 million people in this war. Russia has not suffered nearly that many casualties.
then I went to the Ministry of Defense of Britain and, after a little maneuvering, tracked down its source. It was Ukraine.
Right?
Oh my God.
What did I just say? That's exactly what happens. This is how it gets reported in the West, that you only take Ukrainian propaganda as if it were fact to try to continue this facade.
They get paid for this. Of course, it's paid propaganda. Okay, Ukraine can be stopped when the President of the United States says publicly, NATO will not enlarge. He could add parentheses, it was a bad idea. If he wants, he could say, it wasn't my idea, it was their terrible ideas. He could say Obama did the coup, whatever he wants to say. But if he told the truth, the war will end.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. If you want to stroke Trump's ego, or if Trump wants to do that and try to act like, hey, that he had no culpability in this, which he did, by the way, in his first term. He sent $400 million worth of weapons there. He withdrew from the INF treaty unilaterally. He denounced Russia for giving Snowden asylum and all sorts of other things. He slapped, sanctions on Russia back then. He does have some culpability in this. Biden has a lot of culpability too, but if he wants out of this, that's all he has to say, that the U.S. is done with this thing, try to negotiate a peace to the best possible terms for the United States or for Ukraine, and then walk away with it, drop it on Zelensky's desk, and say, take it or leave it, we're out of here if you leave it. And that's where we could go from this. But we won't go there because the military-industrial complex and the neocons that Trump surrounded himself with are not letting that happen. People like Keith Kellogg and Marco Rubio are not letting that happen. This is a neocon administration in terms of foreign policy. I know we don't, act like that's true, and Trump dragged neocons, I think rightly so, during the campaign. That was some of the best moments of Trump's campaigning, is whenever he dragged neocons like Liz Cheney. But what does he do? He puts those people and guys like Mark Levin on the Homeland Security Committee, and those people are the ones that are steering the U.S. into the abyss, having the ear of Trump more often than non-interventionists. And they're few and far between in this administration. I think Steve Witkoff is a little bit better than the rest of that bunch, but still, he's not winning Trump over, and that's unfortunate. But this is right. This has just been a long line of propaganda. Remember the days that, Russia was almost out of ammunition. Their artillery is failing. Ukraine's on the cusp of victory, whatever that meant, because there were no victory conditions, and it wasn't like they were going to have a regime change in Moscow, by the way. And meanwhile, they've lost all this region of the Donbass. It's like 20% of Ukraine. It's like 90% of the Donbass Oblast, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, and that's what Russia has right now, and we're not going back on that. That's why Russia's in the driver's seat. That's why Trump isn't willing to have a peace. But Jeff Sachs, I think, makes an immaculate case for how this thing could end if we had sensible foreign policy. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below, is Jeffrey Sachs right? What is the only way to end the war in Ukraine? Is there any other off-ramp that hasn't been discussed in this video that you think is worthy of consideration? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. I love his podcast. I'm so glad they did this episode at this Ron Paul Blueprint for Peace conference. It was awesome. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel, Liberty Vault. And in return, I'll give you access to all my members only videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Catch you later, guys. Peace out. Have a good one.